this thing going on. The warm-up was focused on what we did last class, which was the equation for photosynthesis, and then where each part of that equation gets into the plant or is stored inside of the autotroph. So let's begin with the equation for photosynthesis. Anybody got that thing stuck in their head? No. We'll start with that. We'll come back to you. Has anybody got it, like, can do it from memory? Okay, at some point, you're going to want to be able to do it from memory. Jordan's memorized it in 5 seconds and now can do it from memory. So at some point you want that because that is certainly part of the test. Not like recognizing it, like that's the right one, but actually writing it out is part of the test. So make sure you commit that to memory somehow. Michael Hall.
Do we have to memorize like the whole formula part or just the words?
The formula part of it. But most people know stuff, right? Like you know what water is, H2O. You know what carbon dioxide is, CO2. You know what oxygen is, O2. The only weird one you have to memorize is like the sugar, C6H12O6. So yeah, if you can memorize the words, that makes it really easy because then all you have to remember is sugar is C6H12O6. So let's go over those. What are, now that, Jordan, you got it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm memorize like the second part of it.
Yeah. So Noveski, take us through. What's the equation here?
There's 6H2O plus 6CO2 plus sunlight equals C6H12O6 plus 6O2.
Very good. So a couple things in here. Number one, it's a chemical equation, right? You guys did this stuff in Physical World last year. You talked about chemical equations. Stuff on this side of it, do you remember, is called the reactants. And over here we've got the products. Very good. This one's a balanced chemical equation. These coefficients balance it out, if you can remember back even that far. And what the question was today was, where does each of these things come from to allow this thing to happen inside the plant? So where does the plant get water? Where does it get carbon dioxide? Where does it get sun? So we're looking for how it gets this stuff inside of it. So we'll start with the first one in this equation, which is H2O. Where does, you ever see Waterboy? That's every time I say H2O, that's what I think of. High quality H2O. Michael, where does water in a plant come from? Yeah, so this one, H2O, comes from the roots. Right, it is absorbed up through the roots and transferred up to the leaves, where it carries out photosynthesis up in the leaves, where this equation happens. So water comes through from inside the roots. That's true. Next one, carbon dioxide, is not the roots. That's your clue. But where does CO2, Taylor IV, come in from? Very good. Where are those? Ashlyn? Sarah? Yeah, very good. So the stomata, that's on the bottom of the leaves. Sorry about that. Little openings on the bottom of the leaves, little holes that can open and close and release carbon or absorb carbon dioxide in through there. Next part, the answer to this one is not the sun, but we're looking for how the sun actually gets into the plant, like where that happens specifically. And the answer is also not a leaf. We're looking for a part inside of a leaf where that happens. Miss Wilson? There you go. So, sun. And here's in the chloroplast. So the sun comes in through the chloroplast. That's the organelle inside of there, and it's absorbed by the green pigment. The green pigment inside has a name. Skylar? Oh. Ah, look at that. Go ahead. Chlorophyll. Another, by the way, great comedy reference. Can you name the reference? We're talking about chlorophyll here. Nothing? Oh, man. Billy Madison goes back to school. The teacher's talking about chlorophyll. Chlorophyll? More like borophyll. And then he gets kicked out. How can you not? You guys are really missing out on some cultural references here. No, but if you haven't seen Billy Madison, then you've got serious issues. That's something you got to watch when you go home this weekend. You got a 3-day weekend. That's a 3-day Billy Madison marathon.
We have a 3-day weekend?
Yep.
This morning earlier.
So that's all we call them the stuff that comes into it. This is all the things that mix together to make photosynthesis happen. These are the reactants we said. These are all the reactants and where they come from. On the other side, we want to know where these things go. So our first thing right here is sugar. So C6H12O6. Where's this? There's 2 spots. This winds up inside the plant. Sheridan, what's one spot this goes inside the plant? Use your words. Okay. Let's see. What about Chayton? You remember one spot in the plants that the sugar goes? There you go. So sugar is stored. A lot of it is stored in the roots, which is why in the springtime you can harvest like the sap from the trees and boil it down to make maple syrup. Did we talk about that last time? Yeah. And you can do it with walnut trees if you want. You can do it with any kind of interesting tree like that, walnut trees, maple trees. I think you can do it with maybe apple trees or something like that. You can collect it. Yeah, it wouldn't taste like apples, but it would have that. It's got the sugar inside of there. So that's one spot it's stored is in the roots. And then there's another kind of tricky spot where it stores sugar. And it's not sugar you could eat. It's cellulose is the name of this sugar. It stores in another place. Yeah, for a tree or something like that, it's actually the wood of the tree, so it's the part you burn in your stove. So you can think about it as like, I don't know, what would we call that part of a tree or a plant, like the long part of it that doesn't have leaves coming off of it? Stem, trunk, something like that. What doesn't have leaves? That is correct. Spencer, your face does not have leaves. I'm glad that realization has finally dawned on you. That is excellent. One of my proud moments in teaching. So, last one, oxygen. We're looking for how that gets out back into the atmosphere. So, how oxygen returns back to the atmosphere. John Noveski. Which are called the... There you go. Yeah, so that leads through the bottom of the leaves, and it, leads through the stomata, goes back into the atmosphere. And this oxygen, the common misconception is that this oxygen is the oxygen from here, like the plant breaks down carbon dioxide and makes oxygen, but it's actually not. This oxygen that gets released is from water. So this oxygen and carbon get turned into the sugar, and so does that hydrogen. So this, and this turn into the sugar, and that oxygen gets released as the plant breathes out. Last time was on this slide. This was the very last thing we looked at, describing how oxygen gets out of these leaves and gets out of the plants back into the atmosphere. What we'll pick up today with is the actual parts inside of the chloroplast where these processes happen. And then we'll talk about the 2 different cycles that occur. There's a light-dependent reaction, which is why photosynthesis is called photosynthesis. It takes light to make happen. And then there's also one based on like the Star Wars thing. It's called like the dark cycle. It's how Darth Vader met Spock and became a Wookiee. It's with the dark cycle. Which is, spoiler alert, that's what happens in the last movie. Yeah. It's pretty sure. Yeah, if you've seen like Rogue, whatever it is, Darth Vader meets a Wookiee and becomes Spock. By the use of the dark cycle.
You said Darth Vader met Spock.
Why are you making fun of my dyslexia, man? All right, so as we take a look at this, we're going to talk about the structures, 3 of them, inside of the chloroplast, which is, if you remember, inside of plant cells. So inside of plants, there are these things, and in your posters that you did, a lot of you guys made these equivalent to like a solar cell or something like that because they capture the sun's energy and turn it into energy that we can use. So this thing is inside of a cell, and we're looking at the things actually inside of it that make it happen. because it's not just like there's something inside a cell and it makes energy. There's something inside a cell, and the stuff inside of that make the energy. So there's three things you've got to know, three items that you need to know that are inside of here that make this process work. The first one sounds a lot like stomata, but it's stroma. So stomata is the hole on the bottom of the leaf. The stroma is the space inside of this chloroplast. So it'd be like, we can do an analogy here if you want. If you remember, like inside a plant, or inside a cell, there's goop in the cell called cytoplasm. It's kind of like that. It's the chemical matrix goop in between all this other stuff in here, where we'll learn that the Calvin cycle happens, which is called the light-independent reaction or the dark cycle. So there's a bunch of different names for it, but they're all the same thing. The Calvin cycle, the light-independent reaction, which means it doesn't need light, or the dark cycle, which again is how Darth Vader turned into the Wookiee after he met Spock. Yes? Huh? I would assume so. So, and it's also similar to the matrix inside of, hey Christian, thanks. The matrix inside of the mitochondria, so same deal. It's the goop where part of the reaction happens, and we're kind of cruising over it kind of quickly here. The next piece, you got to know, if you could picture in your head, if you can close your eyes and picture a stack of green pancakes.
I'm too tired. Green pancakes?
Yet oddly enough, not too tired to keep interrupting me. So, picture a stack of green pancakes, if you could. And that's what these things are inside of the chloroplast. And those individual things in that stack of green pancakes is called a thylakoid. And that is actually physically where light gets captured and turned into some of the energy that this plant is going to use. Everybody's got jokes today. Everybody's a funny man. He's a comedian. These things are individual pancakes in that stack, and that is where light gets captured and turned into the things that we'll talk about. Mostly, if you remember carrier molecules from cell respiration, like FADH2 and NADH, they've got their own specific carrier molecule. Those things get charged here, and so does ATP. Like ADP turns into ADP in those things and then gets moved out to someplace else. Christian, you doing all right? Okay. There's an electric one right beside you that works a little better. Oh, okay. Well, whatever you need to do. Last one we'll talk about is the whole stack of pancakes that's there. So the whole stack together is called a granum. So if you were to look in one of these things, you'd see three primary things. You'd see these stacks, which are called granums, and they're made up of thylakoids. You'd see the goop inside of there, and that's the stroma. So those are the three things you got to be aware of. All right, so the goal was we wanted the name of the carrier molecules, what their job is, and kind of where they carry stuff from and to. So let's take a look at the names first. I know Taylor's got them. Taylor, what are the names of the carrier molecules we're talking about?
Is it FAD?
Yeah. So F N A D H. So those are the carrier molecules inside of cell respiration that we talked about before the break. And if you remember, what they do, well, I'll ask you, what is their job? What do they do in cell respiration? Christian? Okay, explain that a little bit for me.
I just know you said buckets a lot when you're talking about them. Other than that, I'm not really thinking straight.
Okay, I appreciate your honesty. Michael, and then John. Not quite. John?
About your store energy.
Yeah, they are like a bucket, right? So and they take energy from one place, or two places actually, and deliver it to a third place. Do you remember that like this, FAD and NAD, these things are the empty buckets. So when they look like that, they're empty. And there's two places they go in cell respiration to collect energy, two cycles they use. Alex, you remember the name of one of the cycles in cell respiration that these things get energy from? Okay, yeah. So they get charged in the Krebs cycle, and they get a full bucket there, and then what's the other cycle they get charged in, Christian?
The electron transport.
Nope. Harley? Glycolysis. So they get charged in those two things. They get those bonds created at the end, so this gets like a 2 hydrogen stuck on the end, that gets 1 hydrogen stuck on the end. And they take that energy and they deliver it to a specific place. What's the place that that energy goes to and it gets turned into ATP? Ooh, baby. No, so we're looking for the name of a part of cell respiration. That energy gets transferred someplace, dumped in, and that process turns it into ATP. Harley Funk.
The electron transport.
There it is, electron transport chain. So those things take energy from glycolysis and Krebs, which is not in the form of ATP. So your body can't process those and like make you move. It takes it to the electron transport chain and dumps it in there, and it goes down this series of chemical reactions which produce ATP, which gives you the energy. So they carry energy from one spot to the next. The same thing happens in plants. They just have a different carrier molecule. We had in us NAD and NADH. Plants have a slightly different one that they use called NADPH. And the way I keep that straight is that this one's used in photosynthesis and it's got a P in it. That's how I remember it. That this one goes with photosynthesis and the other one doesn't. So the empty bucket here is NADP plus. And when it gets energy, it turns into NADPH. And this collects energy in the light-dependent reaction, or the one inside the thylakoids. It gets energy from there. And that's, I think, what it says here. NADPH is called the carrier molecule, and it carries energy from the thylakoids out into the stroma. So it collects energy from the sun in a chemical form. Our body can't quite use that, and it's going to take it to another place where the plant body can't use that. Take it to another place where the plant body can use it. And this is, I don't know if you guys used molecular model kits or anything last year, but this is, each one of the balls on here represents an atom. So that's a giant molecule that you've got there. But that's what it looks like if you were to model it. So it's a carrier molecule, just like the ones in us. It carries energy from the thylakoids and the light-dependent reaction out into the stroma, which is where we'll learn in a minute here that the light-independent reaction occurs. And then if you're using the bucket analogy, NADP plus is like the empty bucket and NADPH like the full bucket. And I keep track of that the same way I kept track of them in cell respiration. This one has less letters, so less energy. This one's got more letters and more energy. That's how I keep those straight. And that's the carrier molecule that it uses. It uses ATP as well to carry energy over, I guess. I didn't think of that. But. So are we good on that page? Just a minute. All right. First, so we're talking about kind of this half of it. We're talking about this half of the picture that you can see up here. And this is the part of photosynthesis that requires light to happen. Without photosynthesis, or without light, photosynthesis doesn't happen, period, at all. And here's what happens in the light-dependent reaction that you guys got to know. I've distilled it down so it's shorter than I'd like to make it, but it's just the key points. The light-dependent reaction, the part that needs sunlight to happen, takes place inside of the thylakoids, inside of those little pancakes that we talked about that are stacked up. That's where energy is captured. And it uses that pigment that I think Harley brought up earlier, which was called chlorophyll. So that happens inside of there. Ingredients for it, things that come into it, you can see it here. This is where the light and the water are used. And the stuff that comes out of it would be oxygen, ATP, so energy, and that carrier molecule, NADPH. So things like ingredients for it that you do want to know, light and water. Things that come out of it, oxygen, NADPH, and ATP. As it says, it uses sunlight to convert ADP, which is an uncharged battery, into ATP, which is a charged battery. and then to convert NADP plus, which is an empty bucket of energy, into NADPH, which is a full bucket of energy, and then last turns water into oxygen, chemically separates those two hydrogens from that oxygen, and then these things, the things that it makes, as in like NADPH and ATP, are sent out here into the stroma, which is where the next cycle is going to happen, the light-independent reaction. Add the Krebs cycle and glycolysis send energy over into the electron transport chain. This process, the light-dependent reaction, takes energy and sends it to the next process, where it's going to turn into energy that the plant can use. So that's the way it's like a two-part system. Ours is a three-part system to make work. These guys have a two-part system to make it work. Can I roll this one over? All right. Last one we got. It's got three different names. It's called the Calvin cycle, the dark cycle, or the light-independent cycle. You can call it any one of those. They all mean the exact same thing. And what it does is it uses, I think this is what it's going to say here, it uses the products of the light-dependent reaction, so it uses the ATP and the NADPH to create or produce sugar that it stores in its roots, or that it stores, as wood in the tree, and oxygen that come out of there. That's all right. Use it to produce sugar. Forget that last bit. I'm going to fix that. And some more than others. So, this is the process that finally takes that energy, and it's in the form of ATP and NADPH, and turns it into sugar that these things actually use. That they can then decide to turn into cellulose, or they can decide to turn into some form of glucose that they can store down in their roots. And that's it. That's the process in a very brief 2-day span of photosynthesis. That's what there is to it. Light-dependent, light-independent. Light-independent collects energy, and this thing turns into dependent, turns it into energy that these plants can use. That's all there is to it. Like that. So with that, you guys. So on page, is it 17? Is that the odd number page you're on? All right. You're going to make something that looks like this, and I'll show you how to set it up here in a second. So let me hand out some paper here. In order to set up what you're going to paste onto page or tape onto page 17, you're going to do something like this. So the first thing, you're going to fold your thing in half, hamburger style, but don't make it like a hard crease. You just want something that you can see in the middle here. So, I didn't forget you, but I'll give it. I thought no. See, there's your paper. That table forgot you. So you don't want like a hard crease in the middle, so not like a fingernail crease in the middle, but you just want like to be able to define the middle on here, because you're going to fold some stuff into there. So once you've got it like that, you are going to take the edge and fold it in so they meet in the middle like that. So you want to fold this thing in so it meets in the middle. What's that?
Hard crease?
Yeah, and then you can do a hard crease. So once you've got it exactly in the middle like that, you can put a nice hard like fingernail crease in there. Huh? Me neither. I chew all mine off. It's gross, but what are you going to do? I don't have time to clip my nails. It's like I can either go in the bathroom and get nail clippers, or I can just like handle it. I'll just handle it. Now what you should have is like a piece of paper. If you got it all folded up, it looks like this, and that's how you know you did it right. So it's going to look something like this, right? So you can open it like that. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to tear just those flaps halfway down like that. So you've got like doors that open and close like that. So halfway down those flaps, you can use, I've got scissors over here if you need them. You can use your fingers to tear stuff, by going like that or whatever. But tear those things so you end up with 4 doors on there. So Skylar, you want yours looking like this when you're all done. Like that. It says Sheridan's not trustworthy. He just came back with scissors. Ungrateful.
Use what you got.
Not right now. Let us finish going over this. So next thing, last thing, I should say, is what you're going to put on there now that you've got it all folded up and stuff. So, in the middle, we want the word photosynthesis. I know it's a tough one, but that's what we want. This wasn't just a fold of paper and put it in your notebook deal, Sheridan, as he was hoping. So, in the middle, you want the word, you want to make yours look like mine, basically. Photosynthesis in the middle. And then on each of the folds, like on the inside part, so on this part of the fold, you want these 4 words, one on each fold. Chlorophyll, the light-dependent reaction or light reaction, chloroplast, and the dark reaction, Calvin cycle or light-independent cycle. So you want one word on each of the inside of the flaps there, and then you'll put their definition in to go along with it, or your understanding of them to go along with it. So, under photosynthesis, in red, you can see it here. We want the equation somewhere in this space where you've got room for photosynthesis. So someplace in here, the equation for photosynthesis labeled with words as well. And then, see these arrows that I've got going from here to here? On or around these arrows, what I'd like is a 2-sentence explanation of the relationship between the word in the middle and the word it's pointing to. So, in 2 sentences, explain to me how photosynthesis and the light reaction are related to each other. What is their relationship? How do they work together? Same thing for all these. So 2 sentences, 2 sentences, 2 sentences, 2 sentences. And then the very last bit, a color picture on the front of these things, on the front of your doors here, that shows this vocab word, if you don't mind. And that's what you got. You should have crayons on or around your desk, I think. If you don't, there's a box over here with more crayons in it. There's a box right there with crayons in it. So that's what you guys got. You've got the rest of the class period to get that done, which is something in like that 20-minute range, I think. It's 42 right now. So you can probably get that handled here today.